what you don't want to come into is a situation where you take a completely new kind of security framework and just put that on top of this company and will just drown into it because they simply don't understand what to do and how to work with this, right? So, but I will say that the ISO 27 series is definitely the leader. We also see CIS 18 coming, and we also see the NIS2 cybersecurity framework for some sectors as well. We definitely also see the ISA or the IEC 62443 into the OT part of the landscape, definitely.
Welcome to Secure and Simple podcast. In this podcast, we demystify cybersecurity governance, compliance with various standards and regulations, and other topics that are of interest for consultants, CISOs, and other cybersecurity professionals. I'm Dejan Kosutic, and I'm the host of Secure and Simple podcast. So today we have a very interesting guest. This is Rene Matthiassen. He is a partner and senior security consultant at Front Door Security, a cybersecurity compliance consultancy based in Denmark. And he has 30 years of experience with the various security frameworks, including ISO 27001, NIS2, DORA, PCI DSS, ISA 62443, and so on. And is also involved in, I would say, various non-profit activities like ISO organization and participating in a committee there, and also in helping developing frameworks like NIS2 transposition in Denmark, and also working with Cybersecurity, Cyber Resilience Act. So, in this episode today, we'll discuss how he manages to combine various cybersecurity frameworks, especially how ISO 27001 is helpful for companies or for suppliers actually that supply companies that are in NIS2 scope, but also how all of these frameworks are being developed. So, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Great. So let's start with the first question. How did you actually start with the consultant? What triggered you actually to go into the consulting career?
So actually, I'm coming up from a networking background from the mid-90s as a network engineer, and and did that for quite some years, and moved more into design of networking architecture and security architecture, and that led into more kind of advisory kind of roles, and I really like that. So that was just a way that I pursued to help other companies with understanding what and how they could do stuff. So going into the advisory part of it, I think that was what kicked me in that direction, actually.
Okay, great. Was it hard actually to transition from this, let's say, technical point of view to this more governance point of view when speaking about ISO standards and so on?
So when we did back in the days when we did network designs or infrastructure designs, there wasn't really that many standards to use really. When they came actually, it wasn't so difficult to understand them. I realized pretty soon that I could understand what the objective was and how we could tailor that into the solutions that we did. And for me, actually, I think it was everything was so obvious for some reason. I don't know. So it was pretty easy for me to make that transition into the standard, utilizing the standards when doing the work I did.
No, this is great, because sometimes the technical people have a very good understanding of the technology, but have let's say a difficulty understanding how this fits into business processes and how this need to be adapted for let's say business use and business objectives, and this is sometimes this kind of step is hard to make.
Yeah, true. Yeah, exactly. For me, I mean, the rationale behind the requirements, so to say, or the design frameworks, were, I mean, they weren't too far away from my own way of thinking. So, and I remember thought that a lot of it is just, best practice. Why don't we just do it?
Okay, great.
So, yeah.
Great. So if you're on the technical side and if you have this inclination of understanding these things, then you might actually be a good prospect for a consulting career. So it's
well, yeah, I've done that for 30 years, so somehow I managed to get afloat.
Yeah. Okay, great. Yeah, let's speak a little bit about this engagement that you have in. If I understood well, you participated in developing ISO 27001, yeah. Right? One or two revisions of the standard. So can you tell us a little bit about this?
Yeah, so I joined ISO and the National Standardization Organ, Danish Standard, back in 2011, I believe, 10 or 11, some around that time. And that was at the time when when they were looking into the 2013 version. Actually, the way it was because I keep calling them once a week or twice a week and asking questions about the 27001, and I think they somehow eventually get fed up with me calling every time, and they just ask me, why don't you come and join us? And if you're so interested into these things, why don't you come and join us and help us develop it? And I wasn't surprised because I wasn't even aware that you could do that. So yeah, of course, I would like to do that. And that was in 10 or 11, around that time, for the 2013 that came out and lasted for almost 10 years. And then there was a new version with some changes from the old 114 controls down to the 93 and the new structure of that one. I was involved in that too. So I just been lucky to be part of that. I really like that.
Great. Yeah, and how does this really look behind the scenes? I mean, how are these decisions on what will change in the standard? How is this made?
So usually how it works is that for each country has their own sort of, should we call it, expert group, right? I was a part of the Danish one. And so we're looking into the current standard and see what works and what does not work and what do we need. Has the technology emerged? Have the everything, has new things, technologies come into play? And so we're starting by setting some new requirements that we feel and we think could be beneficial. And the same does the other countries' organs. So we're going to send it around to all of us and say, yeah, okay, this is our suggestion for this one. And then we receive the ones from other countries. And at the end of the day, we do it in a ballot, really. So we we are trying to narrow things down to just a few new requirements or suggestions, and then we do a ballot, and the requirement that gets the most elected, you can say, wins, so to say. So that's usually how it's done.
No, great. I mean, many people actually don't know how the standards are really created, so to say, and yeah, it's basically a democratic process, right? Where everyone can have some kind of say. Okay, and is this similar to your work that you did for NIS2 transposition in Denmark? Does it work in a similar way, or
no, not quite. The NIS2 transposition was more into so that was the directive, right? So when we received that in Denmark, and there was an organ in Denmark that looked into what should be the requirements, so to say, what should be put into the law. Our part, or my part especially, what to look into the suggestions they have made from the NIS2 directive outline, you can say, to what they would like to be into the law or come into the law. And so it's also a democratic process, but it's more into what we think would make sense to have into the law and what would not make sense. Are there any ambiguous requirement, so to say, or should we maybe focus and emphasize this because we really think that is important to have into our law? It could be everything from scope. into requirements, into the emphasis on using international standards and so on. So it's more down that line, really.
Yeah. And I've noticed that there are, let's say, different approaches between different EU countries. For example, Belgium basically said that you can go with this CyFund, the cybersecurity fundamentals from their authority, or you can simply take ISO 27001. So it's basically a more relaxed approach, so to say. Whereas Croatia has published a very strict, not only law but the regulation that followed. It's very, very detailed, and it's actually the most detailed from the ones I've seen so far.
Okay.
So yeah, it's very and prescriptive. And how does actually a country decide in which direction it wants to go, or what was the, let's say, case in Denmark? I mean,
yeah, that's a good question, because what we did in Denmark was to see if we could utilize what already existed out there, and when I say out there, was also what was in the NIS2 directive for international standards. We do not want to have, this is René's security framework, and we should use that. We want to have a standard that can be used and which is well known, tried and tested for a lot of companies already, right? Also because, I mean, we have to audit this one at a later stage as well. So let's make it easy and let's make it best practice. And that was the reason why we thought that, okay, let's go with the 27 series, which is also what's coming into the law now. Yeah.
Aha. So 27,001 will be included in the initial law, right?
Seems to, yeah.
Okay, very well. Yeah, so let's speak. I mean, you're obviously a very good person to discuss this relationship between 27001 and NIS2. So, how do you think that 27001? Why do you think it's important, and how do you think 27001 can help companies that go for NIS2, that actually are in NIS2 scope, but also how is this important for their suppliers?
So, when you're looking into the NIS directive and you see a lot of these requirements, the requirements coming in the articles, for example, in NIS2, I mean, you can see where they're coming from. I mean, it's not a top secret thing, this one. They've definitely been looking at ISO 27001. So in that case, or with that angle, you can say it makes a lot of sense to say, okay, if we want to achieve this one, which is what NIS directive is really about, this could be a tool for you to adopt and to comply with this one. So I think we used to say here that if you are implementing an ISO 27001, for example, you might be 75-80% compliant. There will also definitely be some specifics for your organization that you need to look into. But for the vast majority, you will have maybe 75% compliance already, right? And we have, at least in Denmark, been working with ISO for 10-15 years. A lot of companies knows about this. We have some certified companies as well, so it's not an alien to us.
So when a company that is in the NIS2 scope and when it needs to comply with the NIS2, are you suggesting that they follow, let's say, the steps or the approach in 27001, or do you, let's say, suggest them some kind of a hybrid approach?
A hybrid to what?
Let's say hybrid, something between 27001 and local law, or you go purely with 27001 as let's say as the
right.
The approach.
So of course you have to apply to the local law for sure. That's the most important part of it. But adapting to the 2701, using that as a framework for compliance is definitely what we see in Denmark, what the companies are doing and the direction they're going to. I mean, you have other frameworks, security frameworks as well you can use, but we just see that the majority is looking into ISO 27001 for sure. So I think that would be the recommended approach to pursue a certification down that line, down that direction.
Okay, great. And what, from your point of view, what is then, let's say, the part that is missing, so to say, in 27001? So what needs to be, added on top of 27001 to be compliant with NIS2?
Yeah, I mean, I'm one of the co-authors for the 27001, so maybe I'm not the right one to comment on what is missing, because I think it's comprehensive, of course. But what is missing is, I think one of the challenges, maybe I should put it like this, some of the challenges we see more are into the competences and resources, or the lack of it, you can say, of skillness within this area. I think, but I mean, a lot of what is inside the 27 is best practice anyway, right? So it shouldn't be too different for what you are doing already in your company. Of course, there is some areas that 27 is not diving into that much, only scratching the surface, like software development or whatever. But
and especially incident reporting. I mean, incident reporting is more precise.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, and I've noticed in some of these regulations, in some actually laws across Europe, some of them actually specify much more clearly the role of the security manager. And especially, let's say, Lithuania, Latvia, these kind of countries, they actually specify these roles pretty clearly, which, of course, it's not specified in 27001 nor in NIS2, but some local legislation actually go in these roles and responsibilities much more clearly. And what do you think about this Commission implementing regulation 2024-2690? So basically the one that focuses on digital infrastructure companies. So how does this fit into, let's say, the idea of NIS2 on one end and 27001 on the other end? So how do you combine all of these things?
I think it fits in very well, actually. I mean, I think all the standards, all the regulations, which we could start there, all the regulations fits each other very well into different sectors or different areas of the society. If we look into the requirements in these regulations, I mean, we have some of the same requirements in all of the regulations, right? It's about resilience. It's about having processes in place. It's about having the adequate resources in place. It's about having updated inventories and do risk management and keep track of your suppliers as well, so we can ensure that the whole chain is as strong as possible. So I think actually it fits very well into to each other, even though that is going into different sectors or industries. Yeah.
Now, what I like to explain to let's say, myself and to our clients is that if NIS2 is parallel to 27001, then this CIR 2690 is parallel to 27001 and 2, right? It basically describes in more detail how the things need to be implemented. So it's a kind of a parallel there. And by the way, this Commission implementing regulation is kind of closer to what DORA specifies, and DORA, of course, goes into much more detail. Okay, can we discuss a little bit now how will NIS2 have the impact on suppliers and basically what the suppliers should be doing?
Yeah, definitely. And I think this is where especially NIS2 comes into. I mean, it's very strong because it requires you as an entity to keep track of your critical suppliers, right? And I think that is somehow an area which has been neglected for many years. It's a very important one. I mean, we're looking into this digitalized world we live in, and we are depending on maybe a few big suppliers or maybe many smaller suppliers, but we want to ensure that we can resist whatever comes in our organization, and that includes also to ensure that we have the right suppliers and the suppliers have the same kind of maturity in terms of security levels in the own organization, right? Everything from stock to digital deliverables. So I think this one is an important one to have, which is, I believe, one of the most important ones to have track of in NIS2.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, the funny thing about NIS2 is that it doesn't really prescribe any details. However, when it comes to suppliers, it does provide a more, let's say, 2 additional paragraphs, where it does specify just a little bit more about suppliers and checking the quality of service and their secure development procedures,
Yep.
these kind of things. So, how, in practice, how do you see actually these companies in the NIS2 scope? How do you see actually them handling this supply chain security, and how do you see them actually enforcing this security towards their suppliers?
Yeah, so what we see a lot is the companies try to assess and rank the most important assets they have in the company, right? When they have a kind of an inventory, updated inventory for your assets, what is critical and important for you delivering the service into the society, then we link them up to the suppliers, and we rank the suppliers in 1, 2, 3 categories, for example. Which one is most important for you, and which one is delivering the most important assets or support for you in order for you to have your service running. We also see that there is we look into alternative suppliers for your most important or critical assets to try to see if we can avoid to have one supplier delivering everything, and what happens if this supplier goes out of business. And so that also talks into a exit strategy from the customer sides, for the entity sides as well. What happens if your critical suppliers go out of business, or what happens if they're not able to deliver your service within the right time, or whatever it could be. And I think the last thing is to perform these risk assessment for our third-party critical suppliers, taking all the threats to the suppliers, but also the vulnerabilities, and because it forces you to see how vulnerable you are as an entity with these suppliers and the services they're delivering to you. And I think that's a very important area to be on top of.
And how do you actually assess these? How do you suggest to your clients to assess the risks related to suppliers if they actually do not know the details and the, let's say, internal structure of their supplier?
So usually the way it is done is that, you have different categories or levels of suppliers, right? Some suppliers might be forced to come up with some sort of an ISO 27001 certification, for example, right? They need to provide you with adequate policies and ensure you that they have the maturity in place for the whole governance part of it. They're doing regular risk assessments and so on. Some suppliers might be much smaller, and they have a challenge sometimes. But this is a partnership you need to go into. You're not interested in bullying your supplier and say, if you don't do that or this, then you're out. You want to work with your suppliers, right? And especially in some sectors, some of the regulated sectors, if we're talking about utilities, energy, and that kind of, these sectors, some of the suppliers there, the maturity is maybe not the highest because they have not historically looked into security in that matter or at that level we're talking about. So it's also about, to try to build a partnership with your suppliers and help them to help you, essentially, right? Because at the end of the day, you will be accountable for it, but you need to ensure that your suppliers can help you to stay compliant to these ones, right? So there's different approaches depending on the size and the maturity of your suppliers.
Yeah, But it's obviously not something that you do one time. It's as you were saying, this is an evolving partnership, and obviously this is the best way to increase the level of security.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
You also mentioned these.
No, definitely. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. You also mentioned these exit strategies. So, what are these exit strategies, and how to develop them?
So, an exit strategy is about when you have a critical supply from one of your suppliers. What will happen if somebody breaks a contract, your supplier goes out of business, or something else happens? What would that mean to your business? You're still compliant. You still need to maintain your compliance. So you need to see for other alternatives. It could be dual suppliers, for example. So you can move from one to the other. Sometimes we also see that we have a regulated contract for a customer, and within the contract, let's say a 5-year term contract, the last 12 months, the supplier is enforced and or obliged to provide knowledge transfer and so on to the new suppliers, for example, so you can make a smooth transition to the new one. But I mean, like you do with normal procurement, when you are looking at and assessing a supplier in terms of doing a due diligence, or you're doing a financial risk assessment for them, the same should do for the security part of it, because you want to ensure that you can stay in business and stay afloat if you don't have your supplier with us. So where it's possible, see if you can find other alternatives. There's various ways to do this. It could be parts you have on stock at your premises, for example, to support your business running. But if it's a service, a cloud service especially, and we have a few huge cloud providers in the world, it could be maybe to have double cloud strategy, for example, double supplier strategy for that one.
Yeah. But of course, all this needs to be done only for the most critical suppliers, not for every supplier, right? And this brings back to your point that you actually have some kind of list or register of all the services and suppliers, and making sure that you actually know how critical
exactly
they are.
You need to know what's most important for you, right? And how they're going to be delivered to you.
Yeah. Okay, now once actually a NIS2 company goes into let's say a contractual relationship with the supplier, how do you suggest to your clients actually to create these agreements, these contracts, and how to create these security clauses to actually be effective? So what is the best approach in your opinion?
So we need to work with the market suppliers and our suppliers. So we need to have in our procurement contract, in our tender, whatever we're talking about, the process is, we need to have our security requirements already in that phase. So it could be everything from asking the supplier to provide a copy of the information security policy or tell us about how they're performing risk management, or these kind of things that we need to assess when taking in a new supplier. So what we see back in the days, we used to just put a lot of requirements in, or just squash in the whole 2701 or IC 62443 and say comply to the whole or nothing, right? But that's not the way we should do this. We need to work with suppliers. So let's take it step by step. And again, coming back to how mature your supplier market is. Of course, some of the more digitalized suppliers, they're probably more digitalized. They're probably more mature than that some of the others. They might have assurance report like 3204, ISA 3000, and ISO 2701 certifications, or whatever it could be, right? But we need to start already in the procurement phase when we are assessing these suppliers to ensure that we are delivering security requirements to them from the beginning.
Yeah. Okay. And are you in favor of more, let's say, strict and detailed security clauses in the agreements, or is there some more alternative, let's say, approach which would be more flexible or more effective than this?
That's a good question. I think that depends from company to company. Again, I think I've seen both. I've worked with both. Some are very strict, depending on what they're delivering into. Some are more, you can say, liberal or flexible, definitely. At the end of the day, you need, as a customer, as an entity, to be aware that you are the accountable part here. So the approach you are taking to your suppliers or to your market is back on you at the end of the day, right? It could also be that you have some suppliers that can, they are mature and they can deliver what you are asking directly, one-on-one or one-to-one, but some others don't. Because they're not simply there yet. So you need to work with them if you find them they're still critical for you to have.
Okay, very good. Let's take a different perspective now. So from the supplier point of view, so if a company is a supplier to a critical infrastructure company, what is the best way actually for this company to let's say keep its clients? What does it need to do?
So actually what we see a lot is a demand from not only the NIS2 entities, but even more from the suppliers to the NIS2 entities, because the suppliers feel the requirements or the push from the NIS2 entities saying that you need to have some sort of formal maturity. That could be an ISO 27 certification. If you provide us with the certificate, we are happy, right? Because then we ensure that you have a adequate level of security and governance in place. So we see that actually as a more or bigger demand, I would say, these days, because also, at least in Denmark, the entities in scope for NIS2, let's say, is limited to, let's say, a few thousand, right? But the suppliers to these few thousand entities might be, more massive, right? So, and we see that, and we also see, we get customers in saying that, can you help us with getting certified? Because we have customers we have had for several years, but now they're asking us for having this certification in place, for example. So we see that more and more definitely as a push from the market side of it.
And what is your opinion? Is ISO 27001, let's say, the only or the best standard out there? Or, could companies also go for, I don't know, SOC 2 or PCI DSS or these kind of other standards?
Yeah, I'm not married to ISO 27 just because I have my background with it. Whatever, what is best or what is fit for purpose, right? So, I have worked with many different frameworks over the years, and I'm not the one to judge if it should be CFF, NIST CSF, or it should be SIS-18 or ISO or whatever. So whatever makes the boat float at this specific company, I would say. They are all kind of providing the same at the end of the day. I'm very aware of the detail level of the ones. And what you don't want to come into is a situation where you take a completely new kind of security framework and just put that on top of this company and will just drown into it because they simply don't understand what to do and how to work with this, right? So, but I will say that the ISO 27 series is definitely the leader. We also see SIS-18 coming, and we also see the NIST Cybersecurity framework for some sectors as well. We definitely also see the ISA or the IEC 62443 into the OT part of the landscape, definitely. But at the end of the day, they're kind of, overlapping each other in different ways. So whatever is right for this company, it's difficult to answer which one we should use as a generic question.
Yeah. Okay, and if I understood well, your company is focused really on helping companies with various frameworks, but especially with the 27001 and especially the suppliers of NIS2 companies. So, what is your perspective as a consulting business on how do you actually approach this market and this task of actually helping suppliers for let's say achieving these expectations from NIS2 companies?
So, the NIS2 will come into force in Denmark by 1st of July this year, 2025. And we've noticed that some companies was kind of waiting for the date because the date has been pushed. They were waiting for the date, and they were also waiting for the government to sign the law, right? That leaves us now with 4 months of time before the 1st of July. And we see definitely a massive push right now for these ones, because now they all want to be compliant by 1st of July. And that comes back to lack of resources in the market. I mean, not only in my company, but also in other companies providing advisories and providing projects for these ones. Because there's a limited pool of resources and a limited pool of available resources, right? And they all have to work on different clients at the same time because all have the same date to work up with. So that's definitely going to be a challenge. Another thing is, one of the biggest, you can say, challenges or changes maybe to the law is that the Danish government decided to have the Danish communities in scope. In Denmark, we have about 100, I believe it's 98 communities, and they're now into scope of these ones, and they're gonna have a serious challenge in reaching this deadline. Back to what I was just describing before, right? So yeah, it's gonna be interesting spring, busy spring. I guess for us.
When you mention communities, do you mean the local municipalities?
Yes,
or?
exactly.
Yeah, okay.
We have 98 of these.
Yeah, it's a large number. It's a large number. So you operate in a consulting market, which is typically very competitive, right? There are many consultants. So how do you actually compete? How do you make sure that you have, let's say, that you stay on top, and that you always have enough clients, that your business is growing?
Yeah, I think this has to do a lot with the competences at the end of the day, right? We used to I mean, when companies call us, they call us because, I mean, there's actually two reasons. One of the reasons is that they have heard about us from some of within the network, saying, okay, who has helped you with this? Oh, that has been front door security or whatever. Okay, so it's kind of a referral, you can say. The other one is that I mean, we get invited to a tender, or we get invited to a meeting with a customer, a potential customer, I should say, and we just describe the model of the approach we are taking. We have in front door security, we have developed I wouldn't call it a fast track, or maybe you will. It's a 4.5 months approach to from start to certification. So we take in a companies, and from the day we start to the day where they're waiting for going for the certification, we do that in 22 weeks. So that's 4.5 months, and that's pretty fast. Now, the reason we can do this so fast, and I don't think anyone else is doing that at the moment, at least. The reason we can do this is because we have a vast experience with a lot of implementation products, do's and don'ts and everything. So everything is cut very thin. The other thing is that we have some software going that can help us through that process as well. So that really benefits not only us as implementers, but also the customers to come up and develop all these processes, policies, whatever, right? So it's a pretty strong engine we have for this one, and we can see that a lot of the suppliers really, they don't want to have a project running for 1 year with an exorbitant amount of money and everything is out of control. So if you could do that on a fixed price for a limited time and they can get compliant to this one, they really like that. We see that.
Great. So a combination of your expertise and experience and probably some kind of a software and also this methodology, which has a concrete, let's say, timeline and concrete cost. It's something that is a recipe for a success.
At least for us, it is. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Great. Okay. Yeah. Excellent. Good. So since you also work with these other standards, you mentioned that you're always working also with this standard for operational technology, right? And I noticed that there is increased interest, especially for NIS2 companies, for operational technology. So can you tell me a little bit about it? Which standards do you prefer, and how is this really related to NIS2?
So I'm serving as the president for ISA Denmark section. I've done that for a couple of years now, and ISA are the ones that develop it's actually called the ISA/IEC 62443 series. It consists of framework of 14 standards. Not all of them are published yet. But we see a lot of companies, because when we're talking about ISO 27001, we're talking about, should we call it office IT, so to say. When we're talking about production IT, manufacturing IT, we're talking about other kind of infrastructure, legacy system, protocols and everything. We are using the ISA IC 62443 series. What that does is it gives us a structured way to how we should approach risk assessment, for example, how we should do the designs when we're talking about conduits and zones, how we should split our assets into areas with different protection levels. And it gives us requirements into how we should develop software, develop systems, and it also gives us requirements into if we want to have some products certified according to the standard as well. So we see that a lot to be used in the industry of utilities, oil and gas, manufacturing, production, in general, where the 27001 series is more used into, also in these companies perhaps, but more into the office part of it, where this one is more into the production part of it. And they fit each other very well. So it's actually very nice to work with both in coherence.
Great. Yeah, and I noticed that these cybersecurity incidents that are actually manufacturing industry is more and more affected. Actually, it came very close to the top of the industries that are affected by these incidents. So obviously, this operational technology security is very important. Is becoming more and more important there. Okay, so how do you see this whole compliance, let's say, environment is evolving? So where do you see actually cybersecurity compliance in, I don't know, 5, maybe 10 years from now?
So we have this, or should I say, the European Commission have this vision of the digital decade for the 2020s, right? And they are pushing out a lot of cybersecurity regulations. The NIS2 is one of them. Cyber Resilience Act is another one, and there are others as well. So they are pushing these ones out to the market. So we are not in any way seeing an end of this one. We just see more and more regulated regulated stuff coming out that companies need to comply to. I also think it's very fair to say that in some sectors, areas, whatever, at least the maturity has been very low. There has been no coherence between what they had delivered into the market. But it seems that the European Commission has grabbed it by the root this time and said, now we need to be structured and more resistant, definitely. So at least when we're looking at it, and when I'm working with these requirements on a European scale, we just see them coming down the line.
Mm-hmm. So good time to be a consultant, right?
yeah, it is. If you are into that kind of stuff, yeah, definitely. If you want to advise and help other companies and people, whatever, within this, yes, you should definitely be a consultant within compliance. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Okay, to try to wrap it up, what do you think are kind of top, let's say, things the consultants should be doing? I mean, cybersecurity compliance consultants should focus on in the next, let's say, couple of years.
So it's down to knowledge again. So I would just say that, I mean, if you want to provide value to your customers, I mean, you need to be on top of your game, right? So you need to excel within the fields you are doing. So get as much knowledge you can within these areas. I mean, it's like when I have problems with the law, going to an attorney, right? I have problems with Matthias going to a dentist, right? So I want to go with the best dentist and not the worst dentist, right? So it's a little bit the same here. So it's about providing value to your customers, and the value as a consultant is by knowledge. Also, there's personal skills as well, and so on. But it's about knowledge at the end of the day, right? So stay on top of your game. Get you certified within these ones, because that's what also ensures a company that you are the right one. You have the right level of expertise. Get involved with standards as much as you can, so you get a feel and understanding for not only how they are developed, also the rationale behind the requirements. Why did we choose to set this requirement? So I think that would be my takeaways here, and I would do the same. Continue to do the same, definitely.
Mm-hmm. Great. So this was really a great conversation with you, and thanks for these insights, Rene. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, likewise, absolutely. Thank you again for having me, yeah, it was a pleasure.
Thanks for making it this far in today's episode of Secure and Simple podcast. Here's some useful info for consultants and other professionals who do cybersecurity governance and compliance for a living. On Advisora website, you can check out various tools that can help your business. For example, Conformia software enables you to streamline and scale ISO 27001 implementation and maintenance for your clients. White label documentation toolkits for NIS2, DORA, ISO 27001 and other ISO standards enable you to create all the required documents for your clients. Accredited lead auditor and lead implementer courses for various standards and frameworks enable you to show your expertise to potential clients. And a learning management system called Company Training Academy with numerous videos for NIS2, DORA, ISO 27001 and other frameworks enable you to organize training and awareness programs for your clients' workforce. Check out the links in the description below for more information. If you like this podcast, please give it a thumbs up. It helps us with better ranking, and I would also appreciate if you share it with your colleagues. That's it for today. Stay safe.